My daughter-in-law told me I wasn't welcome at my own lake cabin for 4th of July weekend. She said it pleasantly. She did everything pleasantly, the way you decline a second helping at a cookout. Not rude, just decided. She had 22 people coming, she explained. Her parents, her sister's family, cousins from Atlanta. It would be loud and crowded, she said, and honestly, wouldn't I be more comfortable just staying home? She did not ask that question. She stated it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, because she had never once thought to ask about my professional background, was that I spent 31 years as a senior closing officer at a title company in Nashville, Tennessee. I have read more property deeds than most attorneys. I know chain of title the way a surgeon knows anatomy. And on the morning she said those words to me, the deed to that lake cabin was still recorded in one name at the Davidson County Register of Deeds. Mine. Welcome back to Strong Mom Stories. This channel is for the moments that remind us that quiet strength isn't the same as giving up. If this one stays with you, drop a comment below and hit subscribe. I'll tell you what happened at that cabin on the 3rd of July and why I was already sitting on the porch when they pulled up the driveway. My name is Constance. I am 67 years old and I live in Nashville in a house on Ensworth Avenue that my husband and I bought in 1988. Henry was a civil engineer for the city for 30 years. He designed drainage systems and bridge supports and never once complained about being the kind of engineer nobody thinks about until something floods. He was the sort of man who read instruction manuals cover to cover before assembling anything, who balanced the checkbook by hand every month even after we switched to online banking, who, when we found the lake cabin in 2003, spent 3 weekends measuring every room before we signed the purchase agreement. The cabin sits on Percy Priest Lake, about 22 miles east of Nashville. 3 bedrooms, a covered porch, a wooden dock that Henry rebuilt with pressure-treated lumber in 2015 because the original boards had started to swell and he didn't trust them anymore. He used to get up at 5 in the morning during the summers, take his coffee down to the dock, and sit watching the water go still before the ski boats came out. He called it his best hour of the day. Henry died in March of 2022. Massive stroke. He was 68. There was no warning, no between. 4 days and he was gone. We had talked, years before, about leaving the cabin to our son eventually. Scott is 42 now, a project manager for a commercial construction firm in Brentwood. He drives a truck with the company logo on the door and coaches his son's baseball team on weekends. He is a good man who became a quieter man after his father died and hasn't quite found his way back to himself yet. He married in September of 2018. His wife is 38, runs her own event planning business, and is the most organized person I have ever met who uses that organization as a form of authority. She sends color-coded Google calendars for every family occasion. She coordinates Thanksgiving seating and birthday dinners and school concert arrival times. She is efficient and competent, and I genuinely liked her for the first 2 years. The grandchildren had always loved the cabin more than anywhere else. My granddaughter Clara is 11. My grandson Max is 8. Every summer, since they were old enough to hold a fishing pole, I had driven them out there for at least 2 weeks, swimming off the dock, catching crawdads in the shallows near the shore, playing rummy on the porch while afternoon thunderstorms moved across the lake. Clara keeps a collection of lake stones on her windowsill at home, one for each summer we've gone. Max cannot be within 20 yards of open water without immediately jumping in, fully clothed. That is not an exaggeration. After Henry died, I kept the cabin. People said I should sell it. Too much upkeep for one person, too many memories, too far to drive alone on a Friday afternoon. I told them the memories were the point. The cabin was his best hour of the day, and I wasn't ready to hand it to a stranger. I had mentioned to my son, casually, at a dinner in late 2022, that I intended to leave the cabin to him someday. I meant in my will, eventually. When I was gone, his wife heard someday and began treating it as already. I'm not sure when exactly the shift happened. But by the spring of last year, she had started calling the cabin our lake house in conversation. Not Scott's mother's cabin. Not the family property. Ours. She had a monogrammed set of dish towels made and left them in the kitchen drawer. She rearranged the porch furniture without asking. She had a locksmith come out to my property without my knowledge to copy the key, saying she wanted a spare in case of emergencies. I didn't say anything. I told myself she meant well. I told myself I was still learning how to be the mother-in-law without Henry doing half the work of it beside me. Then she put the cabin on Airbnb. I found out by accident in May. I was browsing the platform to check rental rates for a conference I was helping plan for my former employer's retiree association. And there it was. My cabin. The photo of the dock Henry rebuilt. The photo of the covered porch with the swing. Listed at $285 a night, with a 5-star average from 3 completed stays. The listing had been active for 6 weeks. I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open and the screen very still for a long time. I should explain my career, because it matters for what comes next. I started at Heritage Title and Escrow in 1993. I was 28 years old, newly licensed as a notary, hired to assist with residential real estate closings. I worked my way to senior closing officer by 2001, and I held that position until I retired in 2024. For 31 years, I sat at the closing table and walked buyers and sellers through the most significant transaction of their lives. I read every document in every closing package, every deed, every title insurance commitment, every HOA covenant, every lien release, every easement. I was a Tennessee commissioned notary for the full 31 years. By the time I cleaned out my desk, I had closed more than 4,000 transactions. I know what property ownership means. I know exactly what it looks like on paper. And I know precisely what it means when someone assumes it without documentation. The morning after I found the listing, I logged into the Davidson County Register of Deeds website. Public record, free to search. The cabin at 4412 Lakeview Hollow Road. Fee simple ownership. One name recorded. Constance Marie Alderton. No transfers. No co-owners. No life estate conveyance. No gift deed of any kind. Mine. I pulled my old notary stamp out of the desk drawer. Dark blue handle, worn smooth on the grip from 3 decades of use. The raised seal, slightly faded at the edges. Henry had given me a new one every 5 years when my commission came up for renewal. This was the last one. He died 6 months before it would have needed replacing. I set it on the table next to the laptop. Then I opened a legal pad, wrote the date at the top, drew a line down the center, and started filling in 2 columns. What I knew and what I could do about it. 31 years in title had taught me that the first 10 minutes of any dispute determine whether you're negotiating or enforcing. I was not ready to negotiate. Not yet. She called me 6 days later. She was planning a 4th of July family reunion, she said. Her parents, her sister's family, cousins from Atlanta, some family friends. 22 people total. Catering arranged, a pontoon boat reserved for 2 days. It was going to be wonderful. Then she said, "Honestly, Constance, with that many people, it's going to be a little chaotic. You'd probably be more comfortable just staying home for the weekend. We'll take good care of the place. You know we always do. You'd probably be more comfortable just staying home." My cabin, Henry's dock, the porch where Clara asks me to teach her new card games every summer. The lake where Max has been jumping off that dock in his regular clothes since he was 4 years old. You'd probably be more comfortable just staying home. I said, "Let me think about it." She said, "Of course, take your time." I set the phone down, made a cup of coffee, stood at the kitchen window that looks out at the backyard where Henry used to build things on weekends. Birdhouses, a potting bench, the arbor over the back gate that still blooms every May, with the climbing rose he planted the year we moved in. Then I went back to my desk and opened the legal pad. I had 31 years of training. I had a deed. I had a very clear understanding of what was happening. And I had, as it turned out, a few more things to do. The Lakeview Hollow HOA Covenants and Restrictions, which I had read in full at the 2003 closing because I read every document at every closing I ever attended, contained Section 4.7. It prohibited short-term rentals of fewer than 30 consecutive days without prior written approval from the HOA board. I had not given written approval. The board had not given written approval. Nobody had asked. I called the HOA manager the next morning. His name was Don, and he had been running the Lakeview Hollow HOA for 12 years. I had met him twice at annual owners' meetings. "Don, this is Constance Alderton at 4412 Lakeview Hollow Road. I'd like to file a complaint about an unauthorized short-term rental listing associated with my property." A pause. I heard him pull up the account. I gave him the listing URL, the listing ID, the platform, the dates already rented, and the nightly rate. I had screenshotted everything the night before. "You're correct," he said after a moment. "Section 4.7 is clear on this. I'll send a cease notice to the platform and to the property address. The listing will need to come down within 48 hours, or we escalate to the board's legal counsel." "Thank you, Don." That was the first call. That same afternoon, I filed an unauthorized listing report through Airbnb's Host Resolution Center. I uploaded a copy of the deed, my government-issued ID, and a screenshot of the listing. Under their property owner dispute protocol, the listing was suspended within 36 hours. By the end of the week, it was removed entirely. The 3 completed bookings were flagged for review. On Thursday, I drove out to the cabin. I changed the security code on the keypad entry. The new code was Henry's birthday, only I knew it. I did not call my son. I did not call her. I did not open the family group text, which had been active for 2 weeks. Pontoon schedules, a grocery pickup list, a link to red, white, and blue paper plates, a photo of matching swim shirts she had ordered for her family. On June 14th, Clara texted me from her school iPad. "Grandma, are you coming to the lake for 4th of July? Mom said you might be busy." Mom said you might be busy. I put the phone face down on my desk, stood up, went to the window, came back. I picked up the phone and typed, "I'll be there, sweetheart, wouldn't miss it." I did not say how, but I meant every word. On June 20th, I drove to an estate planning attorney's office on West End Avenue. She was recommended by a former colleague from my heritage title days. I explained what I needed: a revocable living trust, with me as sole grantor and trustee, the cabin as the primary asset, Clara and Max named as remainder beneficiaries, my son listed as successor trustee upon my incapacity or death, meaning he could manage the property after I was gone, but with deed restriction language specifying that the cabin could not be sold or transferred without the written consent of both beneficiaries once they each reached the age of 25. Not my son and his wife together, not her family. Not whoever else might someday decide a lakefront property in Tennessee was theirs to dispose of. The trust was drafted and executed within the week. The deed was re-recorded at the Davidson County Register of Deeds on June 28th. The property was now held by the Constance Alderton Revocable Living Trust. Still mine, still under my control, but with roots that went deeper than anyone realized. I drove to the cabin on July 2nd, one day before her family was scheduled to arrive. I packed a weekend bag, a deck of cards, Clara's field guide to Tennessee freshwater fish that we had been working through together, and the notary stamp, because it belongs on the desk wherever I am working, and that weekend I intended to work. The cabin was exactly as I had left it in May. Her monogrammed dish towels were still in the kitchen drawer. I left them there. I opened the porch screens, made a pot of coffee, and watched the evening light go gold across Percy Priest Lake. A great blue heron was standing in the shallows off the end of the dock, patient and absolutely still the way birds are when they know exactly where they belong. Henry used to spend half the summer trying to photograph that heron. He never got the shot. I took it that evening. First try. I set the camera down on the dock railing and looked at the screen for a long time. "We're finally here, Henry." I went to bed with the porch window open and the sound of the water underneath everything. July 3rd, 11:14 in the morning. I was in the porch swing with a glass of sweet tea and a paperback when I heard the first car on the gravel drive. Then a second. Then two more in quick succession. I did not get up. The voices arrived before the people did. Her mother calling to someone about the coolers, children running ahead of the adults, the sound of car doors left open and trunks being unloaded. Then I heard her voice. Organizing, directing. Back up a little. Yes, right there. Watch the rosebush. Footsteps on the porch steps. She came around the corner and stopped. I was in the swing, paperback in one hand, sweet tea in the other, the lake broad and bright behind me in the morning sun. Her face moved through three expressions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, confusion, and then something colder and more deliberate underneath both of them. Constance. Hello. What are you? You said you were thinking about it. I thought about it. I decided to come. We have 22 people in those cars. I know, I could hear the coolers. She stepped closer, dropping her voice. Her mother had come up to the bottom of the porch steps. A man I didn't recognize stood by a minivan with his arms crossed. Children ran across the gravel behind him. We made plans, she said, quiet and tight. We've had this planned for 2 months. There is no room for you here right now. There is no room for you here right now. At my cabin, on Henry's dock, where Clara counts her stones and Max never walks when he can jump. I set my sweet tea on the little side table Henry made from an old dock board. I placed my paperback next to it. Then I looked at her. The security code has been changed. Your group won't be able to get into the cabin. Her chin came up. That is, you cannot do that. You said you were leaving this to Scott. This is practically our property at this point. You're right that I said I would leave it to Scott eventually, but I didn't sign anything to that effect. I didn't file anything. I didn't execute a deed or a gift letter or a transfer on death instrument. I didn't authorize you to list it as a short-term rental on Airbnb, which is what you did for 6 weeks in the spring. And I didn't authorize you to have keys made, which you also did. I paused. As of June 28th, the cabin is held in a revocable living trust. I am the trustee. My name is on the deed. So no, it is not practically your property. It is precisely my property. The word precisely is the one that matters in a title search. The color shifted in her face. You planned this, she said, and her voice had gone from quiet to something with more pressure behind it. You sat back for weeks and let us plan this entire weekend. You watched us arrange everything, and you didn't say a word. You made a significant number of decisions about my property without saying a word to me either. I just happened to have the deed. She made a sound I recognized from 31 years of closing tables, the sound of someone who had assumed they understood a document and had just discovered they did not. She went for her phone. I stayed in the swing. My son called me 11 minutes later. Road noise in the background, voice slightly rushed. Mom, tell me what's happening. I told him. The Airbnb listing I found in May, the HOA violation notice, the trust that was now recorded at the county, the fact that the code had been changed because the cabin belongs to me and I have every right to change it. A long silence. She told me she had permission, he said finally. She said you'd basically offered it to us. She listed my property for commercial rental without my knowledge, Scott. Without a property management agreement, without my signature, without a single conversation, and then she called me and told me I'd be more comfortable staying home. The silence stretched. I didn't know about the Airbnb. His voice was quiet and definite. I want you to know that. I didn't know. I know you didn't. I could tell. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have been paying attention. After Dad died, I let her take over managing so many things, and I stopped asking questions I should have been asking. That's on me. Yes, I said, it is. That was the hardest sentence of the day, not the section numbers or the trust instrument language. Just, yes, it is. I said, I'm going to be here this weekend. If Clara and Max want to come out, I'd like to have them. If your wife's family needs to make other arrangements, I understand. But this is my cabin and I am not leaving it. He said, "Okay, Mom, I'll be there by 3. He came without her. Clara was in the passenger seat with her field guide already open. Max had his swim goggles on before my son turned off the engine. Her family found a VRBO in Smyrna. Clara mentioned it the next morning between bites of the pancakes we made on the camp stove out on the dock, the same way we had made them since she was 4 years old, with blueberries if we had them and powdered sugar in a shaker regardless. My son slept in the back bedroom that looks out at the water. On the second evening, after the kids had gone to sleep with the window screens open and the sound of the lake underneath everything, we sat on the porch together without talking for a while. Just the fireflies coming out over the cove and the water going dark at the edges. He said, "She told her mother, you've always tried to control things, that your generosity comes with conditions." I said, "What do you think?" He was quiet for a long time. "I think she wanted to be in charge of something that was yours without the inconvenience of earning it," he said. And I stood back and let her, because it was easier than having the conversation. He looked at the water. Dad would have had the conversation. Your father would have had it 2 years ago, with considerably more patience than I would have managed, and considerably fewer legal documents. Possibly. He almost smiled. Didn't quite get there. Are you going to sell it? No. I put it in trust for Clara and Max. You'll be the successor trustee when I'm gone, which means you manage it. But you cannot sell it without their consent once they're grown, and neither can anyone else. He looked at me across the porch. Dad would have done the same thing, he said. Your father would have done it sooner. Yeah, he let out a slow breath. Yeah, he would have. We sat until the fireflies faded out, and the heron called once from somewhere down the shore, one low sound that carried across the water, and then stopped. That was 3 months ago. She has not spoken to me directly since July. That is her choice, and I've made my peace with it. The cabin requires conversation between people who trust each other, and we are not at that place yet. Maybe someday. I won't close the door, but I won't hold it open so long that a draft gets in. My son calls on Sundays now, real calls. Not timed, not scripted, not 11 minutes on the dot while he drives home from somewhere else. He calls because he wants to talk, and we talk until one of us has somewhere to be. Last Sunday it was 40 minutes. We talked about the base in Percy Priest Lake and whether Max was old enough for his own rod and what Henry would have thought about the new marina going in on the East Cove. He would have hated it, I said. And then he would have gone opening weekend to look at it very carefully and report back on everything they did wrong. My son laughed, the first real laugh I had heard from him since the funeral. It sounded like him again, like himself. Clara texted me this week with a photo from her biology textbook, a great blue heron, wings half folded, standing in shallow water. She wrote, "This is our heron, right? The one from the dock?" I sent her the photo I took on the evening of July 2nd. Still water, golden light, the heron standing exactly where Henry used to try to catch him. She texted back 3 exclamation points and a heart, and then, "Can we go back before school starts?" I wrote, Saturday the 23rd, bring your field guide and tell your brother to find his goggles. Her reply came in 4 seconds, yes. I printed the heron photo and set it on the mantel next to Henry's picture, him on the porch the summer of 2019, hands on his hips, looking at the freshly stained boards with the expression he always had when something came out exactly right. 2 photos, the man who built the dock and the bird that still comes back to it every summer. The notary stamp is on my desk where it belongs, next to the cup of pens and the legal pad that has seen considerably more action than I expected when I first pulled it out in May. The important details are always in the fine print. My supervisor told me that on my first day. He handed me a stapler and a yellow highlighter and said, "Read everything, every time, because the line that matters is always the one people skip." I read everything, every time, for 31 years at a closing table and every day since. Some habits are not just habits. Some habits are the reason you're still standing. I own a lake cabin on Percy Priest Lake. I have owned it since 2003. The deed is on file at the Davidson County Register of Deeds, and now so is the trust. Clara and Max Alderton, remainder beneficiaries, recorded and sealed. Nobody takes what is mine without a signature. Not without documentation. Not without a chain of title that says so in black ink on the public record. Henry taught me that in his way. Measure every room before you sign. Read the whole thing before you agree. I have always been a good student.